Oh, and real quick, Richard Spencer is the left. We all know that, right? American conservatism is what allows for liberty, personal liberty, all that stuff. Like CNN and these nonsense places keep trying to find real Nazis, and they, it's their party. Uh, it's the Democrats, and so they'll like go into like rural, like a shack in the middle of nowhere because some dude has a swastika tattoo, and they're like, "Look at the swastika, he's holding you down," and the guy's like, "Do you have any food?" It's like, "This man is oppressing you." Liberal conservatism, Christian conservatism in America is the opposite of what Hitler is. Just a little FYI. And you do understand that Richard Spencer and that branch of the quote unquote alt right, which is really just alt left, they're absolute shit to me. They're statists. So if you're like hanging on because I'll drop a hard N, and I'm friends with people that no one else will be friends with in entertainment, and I'll call out pedophiles and stuff, and you're in this weird little enclave of bizarre people, and you think that I'm somehow going to be on board, I'm not. And it's not because I think you're this awful monster. You're just wrong the same way the left is. You're just out, like Richard Spencer thinks that our freedoms come from the state, not God, not our souls, the state. Richard Spencer, in an interview, told Dinesh D'Souza that freedom comes from the state. Sound familiar? He's basically just Bernie Sanders with a Hitler haircut. These guys are statists. These like white nationalist guys. Anytime you take away merit and freedom and liberty and the Constitution and God-given freedoms and what we, from many come one, when you break away from that, you're now a collectivist. You're now on the road to being exactly what you believed you hated. And I call this stuff out a lot because I think there's listeners right now that are susceptible to that, because I get that. I get why scar tissue overcompensates. I get why you've been lied to so much and shamed for being white, and why is there black pride, no white pride, and why can Israel have an ethno-state, and why can't I get the arguments. Don't just live a life in response to what you don't like. That's weak. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of hate is not love, it's indifference. Hate and love are the same amplitude. It's the distance from zero, it's absolute value. -8 is the same as 8 if you're measuring distance from zero. Amplitude, right? Don't be the left's reverse amplitude. Then you just become them. So just know that. Your arguments all make sense, assuming you want what the left wants, which we don't want. Of course, Japan's an ethno-state. Of course, there are IQ bell curve differences. Of course, there's black pride and prejudice against white people. And if you say white pride, you're ostracized. No shit, because the left sucks. Don't become that as a white person. That's the opposite of what we are, And I think there's people that are so savable for this mistake, so savable. I've gotten tons of letters for people being like, I was almost like really going down a bad path until you kind of explained that. Yes, please, trust me. I'm old. I'm old in the modern world. 38 is like 90 back in the day. You don't want to become what you hate. And don't get me wrong, in war, you have to use tactics that your enemy is willing to use. That's a different story. I think James Gunn should not be allowed to make children's movies because of our outrage. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an anything goes guy. That's not me. I'm not an amoral libertarian. Those guys exist too, where that's close to nihilism. Just figure out what you believe and stick to it. That's all I'm saying.